Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weekend Recap. We are recording this on Tuesday, the 20th of April, 2021. A new revamped format of the Weekend Recap. We're going to power through everything super quickly, and we have a countdown clock to keep us held accountable. 5 minutes per game, 5 minutes per headline, 5 minutes to look at the ladder. This should be super quick, super exciting, and much easier to digest than everything we've done in the past. Joining me, as always, is our wonderful producer, Shaun Mathieson. Shaun, how are you this week?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I guarantee we're going to go over this clock thing. Like, I know we're introducing it as like another gimmick and a way to kind of like keep ourselves on time. But I say this to us, I think we both have said every week, we're going to stick to our time this week. And then every single week we've gone flying beyond it. So like, we will see how the clock goes. People can let us know on Twitter or in the comment section below over on YouTube what they think about it. And also, like, you know, if they want to continue submitting their questions or things for us to talk about each week, you can hit us up either on the socials that you can see linked below or in the comment section as well on YouTube, just to let us know what stuff you guys want to see. But yeah, excited to see how we go, Steven. This could either be a flaming dumpster fire of content or it could be the best thing that we've ever done for the episodes. We will see how it plays out.
So you're saying that this could be Melbourne Victory's performance in the derby, or it could be Melbourne City's performance in the derby?
Your words, not mine. Victory fans can direct their vitriol towards you this week, and that's absolutely fine. But we will get to that game in due course, I'm absolutely sure.
We will indeed. So let's jump straight into it. Western Sydney Wanderers versus Brisbane Roar, and the countdown starts now. So this was a 2-1 victory for Brisbane away from home. Goals to Josh Brindle South and Riku Danzaki in the first half. A goal to Bruce Kamau in the 23rd minute for the Wanderers. Gives you that scoreline. So my descriptor of this game, to sum it up in one sentence, is the Wanderers are looking lost as they start running out of time. They've only got 7 games left to play. They're still inside the 6, but all the teams around them, especially the two directly below them, Brisbane Roar and Western United, have 3 games in hand on the Wanderers, and they're only 2 points back. Wellington Phoenix 4 points back, but only the 1 game in hand over the Wanderers. I think the Wanderers are going to run out of time. They don't look good. They don't look right, and I don't know what Carl Robinson is doing, but whatever it is, it's not working. He seems set in his style. I think that it's too late to be making changes. Like, these changes should have been, that if he does make changes, should have been being made 3 or 4 weeks ago, when they still had time. They've got, as I said, they've got 7 games, and I think they're going to run out of time and get pipped at the post and fall out of the 6. Shaun, your thoughts?
So, full disclosure, I didn't watch this one live. I was at a wedding because stupid love gets in the way of football sometimes. But I did watch the mini match back, and if you kind of went through on the balance of highlights and play, Brisbane did look like the better side. I didn't see the full kind of 90 minutes, but you do kind of cop a fair bit from Wanderers Twitter about how their performances are going, and a lot of them are starting to become more and more vocal about Roboball or the Robinson Revolution or whatever they're calling it. And I think they're definitely starting to feel that pressure and lose that patience that they are now 17 games, did you say? Sorry, Stephen. Into the season. 18 games, apologies. 18 games into the season, only 7 to go. They are one of the sides that you would think has played the most games and should be really clicking into top form. And they've got really like no excuses. Their Bankwest crowds have been good. The stadium itself is fantastic. They got pretty much every player bar one, Yagarkovic, who they've still apparently been going in for, and that's settling him a little bit at the Wanderers. So, at the Newcastle Jets. So I'm not sure exactly what pieces of the puzzle they potentially haven't been getting, or where they think and feel they potentially should be improving, because it really is the squad that they kind of put together and the squad that they were after. So I don't think their plan A is working that effectively, and I don't think they've done enough throughout the course of the season, and the biggest frustration for their supporters and fans, to have a sufficient plan B. This was the battle of the 2-5-3-2 sides, and I thought potentially Warren Moon ahead of Carl Robinson was going to make those little tactical tweaks and adjustments to that shape throughout the course of a match that would potentially, you know, kind of unlock the best of it for Brisbane. Don't forget, haven't been in fantastic form lately either. We were talking about them last week as being someone who might also be in that group of top 6 sides, or sides pushing for the top 6 that may drop out of that scenario because they weren't in good form. Like, there's talk of a bust up between Scott McDonald, who I think was key to their early runs of season form, and Warren Moon itself. They've struggled to get like depth in that squad and roster for when people do drop out. How do they replace them with the same level of quality? And it hasn't quite worked out for them either. So this was one that I think both sides were desperate to win, to really start like getting that edge. And now that Western Sydney haven't, there's a few sides, so I'm sure we'll talk about more. And then again, when we get to the ladder, who are really going to be looking at them as the team that they're going to knock off first. And I think at the moment are the most likely side to drop out of that top 6 scenario.
Yes, so they've got 6 games left, not 7, so my apologies for that. It's Victory, Sydney FC, Western United, Perth Glory, Wellington, and Brisbane. So the 2 teams, or the 3 teams directly below them, they play. Quite a few 6-point matches there, to use that term. You'd expect them to get 3 points against the Victory, just given the shambles that they're in at the moment, and we'll be talking more about them later. For me, I think it comes down to the derby. I think if they don't put up a good performance in the derby, then I'd be calling that a wash. I think that their season will be done if they can't get anything out of the derby. I think 4 games, given the teams they're facing are the ones that are directly below them, I just don't think they'll be able to get anything out of that.
I personally think they could win all their remaining games and still not make the finals because of the gaps between the games that they've played now 18 and those of the chasing pack, where the chasing pack almost at the moment with those games in hand has that luxury of knowing they only need 2 points from a possible set like 9. And I think that's really going to start weighing on the mentality and I think personally, fragility of some of that Wanderers squad, where if they're looking over their shoulder and worried too much about what's happening behind them, they're going to lose focus on completing their portions. And we are into the last 5 seconds, so I'll let you have the final word.
No. If you had something else you want to say, quickly finish your sentence.
No, we are all good. I think we can jump into the next one.
Okay, let's go to the Western United and Central Coast Mariners. This game was in Tasmania. Beautiful looking stadium, even though it is more of an oval shape. It still looked incredibly good on TV, which I didn't expect it to. A goal to Connor Payne in the 5th minute. The difference between the 2 sides here. I could only come up with one descriptor for this game, and that was uninspiring. And that's from both teams. I thought that Central Coast could have done better. They had some good chances, but I thought they could have done better to at least try and rescue a point from this. And Western United, after they scored that first goal, I didn't think that they were going to get anywhere near a second. Based on what I saw, and I could have been looking at that the wrong way. And if you think I am, by all means, let me know. But yeah, I thought they were perfectly content to grind out a 1-0 victory down there in Tasmania. What did you think of this one, Shaun?
Yeah, I'd agree that the stadium was good. University of Tasmania, or Utah Stadium down there, they were initially trying to look at this stadium as redevelopment for potentially trying to get some Women's World Cup games, which they've of course missed out on now. But yeah, it did look like they put on a bit of a show. I do want to see more games in Tasmania. I don't know what the crowd was for this one, but I do desperately hope that a good local crowd of 3,000 to 4,000 went down there and checked it out. I know you are furiously Googling while I try and bring that portion up. But
let's try and find the crowd numbers.
Yeah, I know. It's tough to find. I couldn't find it for the Melbourne Derby as well, which I was desperately looking for before we started. But I thought the same thing, to be honest. To me, the goal that Central Coast conceded was a pretty weak effort, to be completely honest. Like, it kind of trickled and bobbled over the line from about 12 yards out after a simple 1-2 at the edge of the area. And then Connor Payne, who you can see on the screen at the moment, gets to the ball, then on his wrong foot, which isn't the strongest wrong foot in the A-League itself, just wriggles one into the right corner. I really think Birighitti could have gotten to it as well. I don't think he realised how slow the ball was actually moving when he kind of glanced towards it. So yeah, a bit un-Central Coast in that performance, and a little bit, I guess, uninspiring as well from Western United, when they really could have had an opportunity to go down there and really kind of maybe put their foot down a little bit in the second half, really try and get like a 2-goal, 3-goal margin, so that next time there is an A-League game for Western United taking place in Tasmania, which they've got one more left this season, people are flocking to go and see it, and it does become that must-see ticket in town, and they really do help grow football representation and A-League matches in Tasmania. So really what you don't want when you go to these regional fixtures, or you go to these key growth areas, or even for Tasmania itself, these regions that want to be trying to get their own football and want to be trying to get their own teams and licenses in the league itself, is to have these sort of like dour affairs, which aren't going to capture the hearts and minds of people that are maybe sitting on the fence about it, or just going for sheer, like novelty value, that this is the big thing in Launceston this week, so let's go and see it.
It's there, so yeah. So I'm looking at Ultimate A-League because that seems to be the only place that's showing any crowd attendance this year. 3,203 was the attendance for this fixture in Tasmania.
Yeah, not bad. It's Launceston, don't forget, not Hobart. It's a much smaller demographic. I think there's about 200,000 people in and around the Launceston area and surrounding regions. So that's not horrific. I'm not sure how many people would have travelled up for Hobart for it. And to be honest, I don't think many Western United fans would have travelled down. So you'd assume most of that 3,500-ish is entirely Tasmanian locals that are going to check that one out. Unless there were some great Jetstar flight deals to Launceston last weekend. I'm not entirely sure. I doubt it very much. But good from Western United. They're trying to grow into that area. Just a shame, I think personally, that the game wasn't necessarily what the fans would have been looking for. But a huge win for Western United, a huge huge defeat for Central Coast. More on that to come as we get to the ladder and some of the other results as well. What do you think this means now for Western United's chasing prospects as far as their top 6 aspirations go?
I think it puts them in the driver's seat. We've already talked about the Wanderers. We've talked about a couple of different teams as well, just being in and around the pack there. I genuinely think that this is going to put... If Western United can get their form right, if they can work out exactly how they want to play, and if they're perfectly content to grind out these 1-0, like these 1-goal victories, then good on them. If that's what's going to get them into the finals, then by all means. I just don't think they'll go far in the finals once they're there, even if they get a home game, if this is the way they want to play football. I'll give you the last word on Western United, Shaun.
Big question mark for me is that they are a different side when Diamante's not there. So if he goes down, I think at any point in their remaining, 9 fixtures, I guess, if Western Sydney have whatever, then that's their big issue that they have to solve, and we're bang on the money.
We are. Time's up. Let's go to the Melbourne Derby. Melbourne City versus Melbourne Victory. The crowd attendance for this one was 14,031 according to Ultimate A-League. So if that's wrong, hit them up, not us. Seventh heaven for Melbourne City here. It's hard to believe this one was only 2-0 at half-time. My descriptor for this one, complete and utter chaos with disgracefulness mixed in. I'll talk about the disgracefulness first. Traore needs 6 months on the sideline. I'm sorry, anything less is an absolute joke. You do not put your hands on an official, period. And that's exactly that's what he did. For those of you who haven't seen the footage, Adama Traore was given a red card after tackling, was it Andrew Naboo he tackled?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. Yeah, so it wasn't a boot. Studs up. Clean red, saw that the referee was going into the back pocket, lashed out at the referee to get the hand away from the back pocket, only making things worse because that's a straight red in and of itself anyway. And looked like he was prepared to blow up until Scott Jamieson stepped in to try and calm him down. As the captain, you have to be setting a better example. Vukovic got 15 months with 6 months of that suspended, so 9 months all up. I think it needs to be a minimum of 6 months here. That being said, this is the FFA. It wouldn't surprise me if they give him a slap on the wrist either.
Yeah, so in the stadium there, and it was down our end in the first half, Branson from the podcast, fan and friend of the channel and the show, we couldn't quite figure out if it was for touching the ref or if it was for the tackle itself. The tackle wasn't great, and he did actually make contact with Studs very high up on Naboot's body, which I don't think... It looked worse on replay, but they weren't showing replays in the stadium. It was only after that I actually got to see it. I actually thought it was taking place because he had touched the referee in that build-up, and... The weird part was, Scott Jamieson almost, I think, maybe saved him a little bit. I think he would have gone on and probably continued to elicit that contact with the referee because he'd lost his head completely. He was shoving his own players, he was shoving City players. I think he would have been shoving the referee and potentially, getting himself an even longer term suspension. I don't think it'll be 6 months because I think all he did was try and kind of grab the hand. I think Vukovic was more of a bigger swing, whereas I think he was trying to grab and hold, if that makes sense, to say no, not the red card. But yeah, an absolute brain fade. And you'd expect more, not just from a professional athlete, but also the person that's captaining in a club. He's a big deal for their club. He's part of their team of the decade. He's been around for a while. He's a senior member. And then his response as well after getting the red card, as if it's the club's fault or lack of respect for the shirt, to throw down the out-captain's armband, which has happened now twice in the last 2 weeks for Victory fans. Robbie Cruz did it when he was on the bench. I think Robbie's may have potentially been because he forgot to take it off when he was on the field. But he literally ripped it off and threw it down on the ground as he walked away. And there weren't many staff or I think players from Victory either. really trying to get him around him to calm him down or back him up or anything like that. I think they were all just kind of like rolling their eyes thinking, now we've got to go and deal with this situation. If you remember back to the first Melbourne derby, the 6-0 win, it was 1-0 at halftime. Similar to this one, it was 2-0 at this point. Not a coincidence, I think, that about a minute after the red card, Jacob Butterfield, one of the more experienced players in the side, conceded a penalty while he was filling at left back, and it was the laziest trailing leg challenge you've ever seen. And then again, for the second time, most of these goals came in the last 15 minutes. Forget about Brebner, who we'll talk about more later on. Forget about the fact it's a Melbourne derby, whatever else. A professional athlete, if you've got that pride in your performance and what you do, you don't roll over like that in the last 15 minutes. And if you are someone in that team and you're seeing those patterns of play and you're seeing the way that it's going and you're seeing 3 goals go in a 2-minute period, you go and stand on the edge of the 18-yard box and you have that kind of pride to say, okay, no more. We're not going to keep going. We're not going to do whatever. Go and have a look at the touch maps and the heat maps for that match. They barely got out of their own half and they barely moved as far as running with or without the ball. It was ridiculous looking at some of the heat match analysis throughout the course of the week. So I think Victory fans have every right to feel aggrieved that they have served that up, and then they have every right to feel aggrieved that they lost 6-0. The fans went down and protested at their training ground, and it did not sink in with the players one bit. I don't vouch for Victory fans a whole lot, but I would be incredibly frustrated in their position that they're getting that performance after coming off the back of a 6-0 defeat a couple of weeks ago. Worst part for them still, and sorry because I've gone over with this one, is that they still have another derby coming up in 2.5-3 weeks. There's one more to come, which could be an absolute bloodbath if things keep going the way that they think they're going to. And unfortunately, because of everything that happened in this game, we haven't even talked about the best part, which is how brilliant City were and how efficient they were and how much this was a training ground match for a variety of reasons. But excellent performance.
So we're going to go over with this one.
Sure.
So we're 3 games in, we've already gone over, but that's fine. It happens. A couple of quick points here. So I think Traore, the reason he's going to get 6 months is because he went in again at the referee, slapped the referee's hand away, referee moved away, and Traore went in again. So that shows intent to manhandle the official. But that's my opinion. Whatever the review committee decides, whatever they decide. One big stat in their last 3 rivalry games, so 2 Melbourne derbies and a Big Blue, Melbourne Victory have conceded 16 goals. 16 goals in 270 minutes of football. That's with 2 red cards. And I genuinely believe the only reason we're not looking at 20 or 21 here is because of Sydney's inability to finish. And more on that later, because I've got a lot of frustrations to get it after that game on the weekend against Adelaide. 5 goals for Jamie McLaren. Do you think Bobo's record is in danger?
I was really hoping Archie Thompson's record was in danger for a little bit for that 5-10 minute spell at the end of the game. That really would have been, for me, that would have been the icing on the cake, not just to take, that's the biggest derby result ever. It's the most goals City have ever scored in a match. It equals the biggest winning margin from that 8-1, was it Sydney FC Central Coast a couple of years ago? 8-1. There was an 8-1 somewhere throughout the course of history. I can't remember exactly when it was. Apologies. Please let me know on Twitter or in the comment section below when it was. But it's the equal biggest winning margin of all time. Jamie McLaren equals Archie Thompson's goal for most goals scored in a match, 5-0. Not quite the same as doing it in the grand final, but that was the last one. I was hoping he was going to get that last little penalty in the dying stages. Make no mistake, this could have been 10. And Victory have now conceded 42 goals in 16 matches, which I'm just doing some quick math on the calculator, if you can hear my keyboard clacking away in the background there. 3.2 goals a game, to be over that 3.
On the body,
yeah. Oh, no, was it? Sorry, I thought you had looked it up for me. No, I haven't.
No. I said 3.2.
It's 2.63. To be over 2.5 goals on average a game at the 16 goal mark of the season, we are starting to get into New Zealand Knights kind of territory, Central Coast Mariners kind of territory as far as all-time worst seasons are concerned. And this is they won a game the other week against Newcastle. It looked like they were going to turn the corner, but yeah, just I think at each point they're let down by their leadership on and off the field, and some of those senior players really need to be looking to pick the team up and go from there. I think some of the young players are copping unnecessary pressure by being put in the situation that they're in. The worst part is I still feel like there could be worse to come for Victory this season, which is mind-boggling to say. For City, huge congratulations to them as well. Obviously, acknowledging my bias to go top of the division, I think, after being in that chasing pack and having that really poor spell of 3 defeats in a week is a great turnaround for them. the Central Coast story has been magnificent, but I think a few people have been clicked on for the last couple of weeks about eventually, I think City and Adelaide and Sydney, who we'll talk about more in a moment, are going to catch them and get that win back up. But it was a fantastic performance. This could have been 10 on another day. And really that kind of spell between the 75th minute and the final whistle going, City were definitely 100% like going to their gear 4, gear 5, whatever you want to call it. That was a scary passage of play because, like, even though Victory had it from the kickoff, they were losing it within 30 seconds of that, and they were immediately conceding a chance or an opportunity. So, fantastic fluid play. I do want to shout out Marco Tilio as well, your boy who we've spoken about a few times. He's only been getting like 5, 10, 15-minute chances. He's got a winner, an assist, 2 assists on the weekend, and he won a penalty as well, which I think kind of technically counts. Just a phenomenal performance. I don't think Naboot or Craig Noon deserve to be dropped in any way, but I definitely think at one point or another, we will likely see Marco Tilio starting up front. And as we get into more stuff later in the season about international call-ups and whatever else, like I think he's someone that's really going to start pushing for regular first team minutes, such has been his impact this season, as has Kolakovsky's, as has a whole bunch of fantastic players across the league. The young players coming through at pretty much every club except Melbourne Victory, and even then they've got a couple as well.
Yep, youth players only getting garbage minutes off the bench. I wonder where I've heard that before. Oh, I know where I've heard that before. Let's move on to our next game. Sydney FC versus Adelaide United. A 2-2 result here. Oh, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And yet Corica, by hook or by crook, why, I don't know, continues to do the same thing every week. He doesn't use his bench. When he uses the bench, it's 15 minutes, it's 20 minutes to go. He didn't even use most of his bench on Sunday afternoon. Such was the state of this game. Sydney FC had to withstand a lot of pressure early here in the opening 20 minutes, and they did, doing so reasonably convincingly. Bobo scores in the 19th minute. Bobo scores in the 51st minute. Jordan Elsey and Tommy Urich put Adelaide back in the second half, 75th and 79th minute respectively. A red card to Ryan Grant in the 93rd minute for denial of a goal-scoring opportunity. We heard Corica after the game come out and say, we should be getting these points, we should be doing this, it's just not working. Okay, it's all good to say that, but you then don't change anything. Rattray was out because of suspension. Neuenhoff wasn't there because of a back injury and was reported to not be match fit. And, if he's not match fit, that's fine. But I find it hard to believe that he wouldn't be match fit coming off an injury if he was getting more than 20 minutes a game when he's actually playing, which he's not at the moment, because for whatever reason, Corica has got this love affair with Paulo Rattray and thinks Paulo Rattray is the greatest, even though he's giving away a yellow card every game and is getting suspended. And in the last few games, it's looked like he's just going to give away a straight red at some points, and already has this season. I don't know how Corica can say we're not good enough, this needs to change, that needs to change, but then he doesn't change anything on match day. One thing I did want to say as well on this, from a gameplay perspective, is the team running right to left along the broadcast side touchline. If you're watching this game, there was oodles of space for both teams. Whether it was Adelaide in the first half or Sydney in the second half, they were able to get down the left wing at will, and were just crossing it in and just weren't able to finish. But I don't know why there was so much space on that side of the ground. I just thought it was interesting. Costa Barbarouses, again, I don't know why he can't finish. The only reason Bobo got his second goal was because he bailed Costa out, who was essentially one-on-one with the keeper. I don't know how much longer Corica is going to persist with this, whether it's Costa, whether it's, Rattray, whatever it is, not using the bench properly. The longer that this goes, the less faith I have that Sydney's going to make the finals. And the only reason I think Sydney may still make the finals is because there's every chance that other teams fall away around them, leaving Sydney in by default because they're still firmly entrenched in that top six. Sorry, Sean. What do you think on this?
We're going to go over. You are being way too harsh. You were there, weren't you? You were on the stadium, right?
I was there, yes.
Yes, you are being way too harsh. This was a very good game. The way that we talked about City and Victory being a fascinating game for how big a blowout it was. To me, I think this was probably the match of the round from a competitiveness perspective. I view at the moment, I view both these sides as potentially finishing top three and getting involved in the conversation with Melbourne City. And please don't be upset at me, Central Coast fans. Shout out to Marty and Carly and all our great fans over on Twitter as well. I don't think they're going to kind of sustain that challenge, but I think Adelaide and Sydney can. I don't think there's any shame at any point drawing or losing with Adelaide United now that they've really started to click. I was a big rap for them at the start of the season, where even though they weren't necessarily getting the greatest results, thinking back to, I think it was like a 0-0 draw or a 1-1 draw or something against Western United to start the season, when they were playing their football, it was good to watch. Like, they were playing a pretty expansive brand. They were moving the ball quickly, efficiently. They weren't really bogged down in anyone taking too many touches. They've added Craig Goodwin, which I think has boosted their whole team. They've settled on a defensive lineup, which I think was a concern that they had for quite a while. Filling in those fullback spots was providing a challenge. Josh Cavallo's been excellent. I've forgotten his name again. I always get this one wrong. It's not Pablo Sanchez, or it is Pablo Sanchez. With the Spaniard that they had dropping in at left back has been excellent. I personally think Adelaide are very, very good at the moment and in very, very good form. So I do think you're being too harsh in that respect. What I would say is that you're frustrated about subs not getting used. Only 2 of the 5. The same thing for Adelaide. They only used 2 of the 5 as well, but I totally get it. The portion I would call out is Sydney on the bench had Ben Warland, Trent Bahaja, Luke Ivanovic, Tom Hewitt-Bell, Harry van der Sag, Patrick Yazbek, who I know nothing about, and Patrick Wood. The only one of those who I think would potentially start if I was picking the team would be Patrick Wood. So I don't look at the Sydney FC starting lineup and think that looks particularly weak. Like, you've got a full squad. I don't think Barmihan starts if everybody's fully fit. I think there's a few other players that are maybe question marks around them if they're fully fit as well. So I thought this was a fascinating contest. I thought Sydney FC, it was a different Sydney FC performance where they were really quite content to let Adelaide have the ball in certain areas, and I think Adelaide finished with over 60% of the ball away from home. You've got to remember the red card came in injury time. Like, it wasn't like they were defending with 10 men for an hour or anything like that.
Yeah.
But some of the stat lines there, if you look at that sort of stuff, relating to like passes completed in opposition areas and all that sort of thing, it was a very un-Sydney FC, like the way that they were happy to let them have the ball and whatever else. Both you and a lot of the rest of Sydney FC Twitter is very critical of Costa. I actually don't think Costa's doing anything different to what he's been doing for the last, basically his whole career in the A-League. He's never been the 10-goal-a-game striker. He's never been a prolific finisher. He's a setup man. Like, he's designed to get into those channel spaces between the penalty spot, between the 18-yard box, and really find like a tap-in ball to get back home. But Bo's not mobile enough to get there the way Adam Lafondra did. He's not clinical enough, even though he got a double in this game. I think the expectation that Costa Barbarouses is going to score 15 goals this year was never likely, given that that's not the role that he's suspected to fulfill. And I think if he wasn't fulfilling exactly what Corica was asking him to do, he'd have been dropped already, and he hasn't been. My portion would be getting Bobo out of the side and trying to get Patrick Wood in there for as many minutes as humanly possible, because I think he's incredibly exciting, and I think he's someone we'd talk about as being like an Ollie Roos bolter to lead the line. And there is a huge depth of young forwards at the moment in the league that are looking to really get into that squad for Tokyo. That would be my one input and conjecture. But yeah, look, I think to be that critical of a Sydney FC side going up against one of, I believe, the form teams in the competition is incredibly harsh. And on the flip side of the coin, I think Adelaide United would look at this game having gone 2 goals behind and look at it as being like a valuable 0.1. I think both of these teams will likely finish in the top 3 based on their current form. And Sydney FC, like, as critical as you want to say about them not making finals, they're on 27 points still, and they've still got games in hand on MacArthur and Western United and Western Sydney and everybody else as well. And that little extra gap, those are the telling moments that I think are going to come. And I think they still, to me anyway, haven't quite hit top form. It would not shock me if they beat someone like 3-0 or 4-0 in the last 2 weeks of the season, and then all of a sudden we've got to deal with Sydney FC fucking hitting 5th gear in the final series, which nobody really wants to contemplate having to deal with. So yeah, I thought this was an excellent contest. This would be my pick for match of the round.
No, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think my biggest frustrations come from the fact that it was a 2-0 lead. The fact that, because for whatever reason, Corica still persisting with his 4-2-2-2, If Costa's not expected to be a 10 to 15 goal scorer, that's fine. Change the formation. Suit the formation better to suit the sort of player you want Costa to be. Not using the bench. A couple of the players look spent. I know that at that point they were chasing the game because, again, Corica doesn't want to use his bench early. They were 2-0 up. If Sydney didn't have problems finishing, this game should have been put to bed earlier. It should have been put to bed, 70 minutes in.
So I think the thing
Adelaide had the chance to get back into it.
The thing I'll come back with, like Sydney FC, they were two set pieces, a great free kick from Tommy Urich and a set piece for Jordan Elsey. Like shit happens, and that's that's where it fell apart. I don't think fresh legs, unless you got someone on the bench who's 6'5", would have really helped in either of those situations. Shout out to the ref as well for doing a weird dummy run in the build up to the Tommy Urich free kick. If you haven't seen that on Twitter, go and check out the timeline. Very, very strange. But yeah, 2 set piece goals conceded. So like I don't 100% know with that. But Sydney FC's never been a youth development league or team. They're the ones that coined the phrase the A-League is not a development league. Like that's from Graham Arnold in the most successful era, and Steve Corica was his assistant. And
I get all that. Sorry, I get all that, but at the moment, that's what Sydney needs to rely on, and they're not. Like at the way I'm looking at it, and I know a lot of fans tend to agree with me, is that it's not going about it the right way based on the current needs. I think there's still a part of them that thinks they've got Mijewski, they've got Lafondra, they can go out and put 7 past any team they want, and that's not the reality at the moment. And the only reason I say use the fresh legs off the bench, and I'm not saying that those 2 goals wouldn't have happened, but they should have had a third. They should have had a fourth well before Adelaide even scored 1 in this game. Such was the way things were developing. So I think that's where my frustration comes from, is the fact that it's the continual lock into the formation. It's not using the bench. And it's the fact that Corica is saying week in and week out, we need to change things. This isn't good enough, and nothing changes week on week. Like I think that's where a lot of the frustrations are coming from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 4 points off top spot, second best goal difference in the division, and I don't think anyone's panicking as far as the Sydney FC coaching staff and whatever else are concerned. And only 1 defeat in their last 5. Like they're not in terrible form. I don't think they're looking at this as being a massive failure. I think they're looking at it as they're just trying to get that level of performance. Like if they had picked up 3 points in this game, like we're probably having an entirely different conversation. But I think it would do a discredit to Adelaide in the way that they're kind of playing at the moment, the way they've really gotten their momentum going, to not give them enough to respect to say that they deserve their points and to get back into it as well at the same point. It would not shock me if Sydney FC go on a little run and we have a conversation in 2 or 3 weeks' time with the exact same lineup that's going to drive you absolutely mental, jumping up and being in that kind of top 2 conversation and talking about Champions League and talking about a potential title push. So they've got some big games coming up over the next few weeks, but I think they're looking at their run home as being potentially all winnable fixtures, and really kind of coming into the final series with a head of steam. But I don't want to dwell too much more on this. I think we're just going to have to politely agree to disagree. It's your right as a Sydney FC fan to be critical of the coach, and I just want to give a shout out and credit to Adelaide, who I think are playing some fantastic football.
Yep, no, that's completely fair. I mean, there's as far as I'm aware, there's 2 big blues and a Sydney derby coming up. So let's if there was ever an opportunity to, as you mentioned already, put 4 or 5 past the team, it's going to be those 2 big blues. So let's see what happens there. We have run way over time on this particular fixture. So let's go out to the bullpen in Campbelltown. MACARTHUR versus Newcastle. Confusing and concerning is the way I want to describe this. And I'm looking at that from a MACARTHUR perspective for this 2-2 game. And I'm going to butcher this name. Charles Mwamba in the 36th minute opened MACARTHUR scoring. Loic Poyo in the 45th plus 2 minutes in the so injury time in the first half made it 2-1 with O'Donovan converting a penalty in the 27th minute. Ugarkovic with what, if any goal out of this round was going to be goal of the season, I'd give it to Ugarkovic. So take that and stick it Brenton Speed for your Andrew Naboo failed cross goal of the season. I can't give credit to a failed cross as a goal of the season. I just can't. I was disappointed in this performance from MACARTHUR. I thought that they could have done a lot better against a team that's been struggling. You know, this is a Newcastle side that just lost to a team that sacked their coach in Melbourne Victory a week ago. They're just, I don't know. I think if we want to see MacArthur playing good in the finals, then Ante Milicic needs to work something out, because whatever they're doing it's very inconsistent, and I don't know how they can't get that consistency. And I think that's where the confusing part comes in, and the concerning part is that they should be putting away a team like Newcastle. Every other team in the league has been able to put away Newcastle, and MacArthur weren't able to do so here, and I don't know why, because they absolutely dominated this game.
They did, and I don't think if Ugarkovic doesn't score a goal, the season contender, that Newcastle get the draw, to be completely honest. I don't think they were creating anything in terms of chances to suggest they were going to get that point back without someone pulling out a worldie. So that portion of it is harsh, but at the same time, I think MacArthur have lost 2 of their last 3 and then drawn with, potentially one of the worst sides in the division, or not the worst, but one of the worst sides in the division. I'm actually putting the same kind of question mark against them as we have against Western Sydney Wanderers at the moment, where I think the big danger for them, and they're both on the same points, or I think they're on 27 points maybe, but a -3 goal difference, they will 100% now start looking 18 games played behind them and thinking, who's Brisbane Roar playing? Who's Western United playing? Is Wellington potentially back in that mix again? And if they've got games against those sides coming up over the remaining 6 games, I think you said it was. Sorry, I've already forgotten it. For Western Sydney Wanderers.
24 for every team, and I'm happy to be proven wrong on that.
That's fine. Six games to go for them. Like, I think if they've got games against those sides, like, they're absolutely going to be looking at someone that really needs to start picking up points to secure their place in the top 6. It would not shock me if MacArthur and Western Sydney get overlapped by somebody else, such as their kind of like fall from form in the last kind of 3-4 weeks anyway. So hopefully they can kind of get back to that, because I think it's going to be important for their fan base, and I think it's important for a new club and their fan engagement to be successful from the off. I don't know, you know more about Campbelltown as an area than I do. Like, will the Campbelltown sporting faithful that doesn't already support Sydney FC or Western Sydney or someone like that be looking at MacArthur if they're not a top 6 side? Unlikely. I think they'd be looking to stay a Sydney FC fan, or they'd be looking to stay a Western Sydney fan given the match day experience they get at Bankwest. But especially given that the bullpen orchestrated the walkout as well, so they're already alienating their active support, which is it's ridiculous that this was supposed to be the club's bullpen as well. This was the bullpen that was being orchestrated in conjunction with the club, and they've walked out. The only thing I thought was a valid concern is that they won't let people under 18 in the bullpen, which is unique. I haven't seen that before from, and admittedly, just admitting my own exposure to the Melbourne teams, I don't think I've ever seen anyone, I think under 16s are sometimes maybe asked to move, just because it is largely a standing section. But it doesn't happen really anywhere else. So I'd be fascinated to know what the concern is. And if the portion and the big sticking point is that they're on the corner and not behind the goal, they knew that was going to happen. So I'm not sure why that is a concern now and wasn't a concern 12 weeks ago when it was first announced, but we'll see how it plays out. And I do hope
it could be the side of the ground they're on. So they're on the broadcast side. All the other, when Wanderers have been at Campbelltown, the active support has been on the opposite side of the stadium, and that's where the other active support bay is, in the corner. So I think if you had both active supports on the same side, the non-broadcast side of the ground, then I think it might be less of a concern, because it is a very small corner there in Campbelltown that they've been stuck into. It's things like ticket prices. But I mean, these were all things that were known. So I find it interesting that they've chosen this game against Newcastle to walk out of. I think it might have had more of an impact had they done it against Sydney FC a few weeks ago, or if they've done it against the Wanderers. If they did it against a big team, then I think this walkout might have more validity to it. But the fact that they've done it against Newcastle, it reeks of let's do something for the sake of doing something. And this is a game we don't really give a shit about. So, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. And if anyone from the bullpen wants to tell me that I'm wrong, come at me. Have you got anything else you want to say on this game, Shaun? Or
I think we're all good.
Okay, let's move over to the West. a 3-1 victory for the Phoenix on the road in the distance derby. The absolute troll job of turning up on the Wollongong kit and then destroying the glory was marvelous for me, and I absolutely love it, and I want to see more of this. Ben Wayne, Louis Fenton, and Josh Soterio all getting on the board in the second half for the Phoenix. Joel Keenazy making it 1-1 in the 58th before Fenton and Soterio scored, as I just mentioned. I think this is going to turn Wellington's season around. I think that this is 2 games now they've played, 2 distance derbies they've played now, a 3-0 and a 3-1 scoreline, one in Wollongong, one in Perth. I think this is just what they need to kind of turn that season around, because I know you've been critical of them and don't think they're going to make the 6, and I think they will. I think that if they can continue to just string together clean performances like this, that they're going to go a long way.
The Knicks? You think the Knicks are going to go a long way?
Yes, I think that if they can string these performances together, I think that they can still make the 6. It's just going to take a lot of performances like this for them to do it.
To me, all right, so let's focusing on the match itself. Wellington were excellent in this game. Perth were atrocious. Liam Reddy with a special didn't really help him anymore. Throughout the course of that game, I don't know what goes through his head at some point. He's been chasing. So his next clean sheet will get him the all-time clean sheet record in the A-League itself, which is mind-boggling, because when most people think Liam Reddy, they think about him trying to dribble it halfway up the pitch and then giving it to an opposition player, which he did again on the past weekend. He's been chasing that record for about 10 weeks, and they just cannot seem to stop conceding.
I think they said it was 16. I could be wrong.
16.
I think he's been chasing it for the last 16 games. If I recall, that's what Fox said. I could be wrong.
He did get dropped for a bit where Valafi came in, so maybe it's like halfway in between those two. But even then, Perth, I thought would die. Keenazy's goal was an absolute screamer, but they didn't create a whole lot out after that, considering how much attacking talent they've got. Wellington were good. I'm going to butcher, everyone's going to savage me with this. I don't think DeVee's had that great a season. I think he's been the best player for Wellington, 100%, and I think he's quality.
Hot take alert.
Well, no, how can you say that someone's had the best season in the league if you're currently sitting in 9th? They've played 17 games. They've only got 1 game in hand on Western Sydney and MacArthur, and even if they win that game, it's still not enough to leapfrog those teams. So I still have them as a question mark. I don't think they're going to go on and make the finals, because I think they've left their run too late. This was 100% a must-win game for both sides to try and make the final series, and maybe when we go through the ladder, we'll kind of put ticks or crosses next to everybody. I think Perth's season's done. I don't think they've got anything left to play for now. We spoke about the home advantage that they'd kind of developed over the opening 14, 15 games of the season and how important this run was going to be. And they 100% had to start this run of home games that they've got in April and May with a victory and with 3 points against another side that is around the same position as them in the table, like Wellington. If they can't beat Wellington, they're not going to beat any of the teams higher than them in the division to get the necessary points to sneak into that top 6. Happy to be proven wrong. Mathematically, it's not a possibility. But for me personally, this result puts that cross through Perth Glory season, and I don't think they're going to finish anything other than potentially above the 10th position. I think that's the best they can hope for at the moment. Wellington proved me wrong. I think, the fantastic portion as well that we haven't spoken about is that they are going to get to play at least 1 game, maybe 2, back in New Zealand with the Trans-Tasman bubble announced earlier this week. They are still going to be based out of Wollongong because a lot of players moved their families across with them. They've signed leases, all that sort of stuff. They're committed to training and playing out of the Wynn Stadium facility for the rest of the year, no matter what. So that financial implication makes sense, but at least they are still trying to take 2 of their games back to the Cape Town and trying to get as many Phoenix supporters there. Please, if you are a Phoenix fan, go and support them. They haven't left you. They've been forced into this scenario. So hopefully those 2 games can kind of help push them through and they get good results. But for me personally, I still look at Brisbane and Western United as being the more likely sides, I think, to jump into the top 6 at the expense of MacArthur and Western Sydney. But even then, I would say MacArthur and Western Sydney still remain in the box seat for me. We will see how that plays out in a week's time when we catch back up next.
Yep, it's definitely something to look forward to. No, I only think the hot take is because you said it hasn't had as good a season as everyone thinks he has. I don't think he's had the best season out of everyone, but yeah, that's still a very hot take, and I'm supposed to be the one with the hot take here.
I saw more than one tweet on the weekend, so I watched the game, and he was good, and he's and he's a quality player, taking nothing away from his value to the league. I think he's fantastic. I saw multiple tweets that were give him the Johnny Warren already, and I'm like, Wellington, they've played 17 games and they're sitting in ninth. Like, that's not... Anyway, one of it was from one of the New Zealand Sky Sports commentators, so who knows how much we can actually put weight to that. But again, we've gone over time. I just couldn't help myself getting that dig into the commentary team.
No, that's fair. So let's move on to the ladder. Melbourne victory all the way at the bottom, 11 points, 16 games played. I'll be so glad when we can go back to everyone just having played the same amount of games. It's going to make this so much easier. 18 games played for Newcastle, 13 points, 11th spot. 10th for the Glory, 18 points, 16 games played.
Before we go through that, are we crossing all of them out and saying no finals for those teams at this point, or do you hold hope for Perth?
No, I'm happy to cross them all out. I don't think the Glory can do anything here. So 18 points, 16 games played, 10th spot. So the bottom three, not mathematically. I don't even think the victory have technically been mathematically eliminated yet, which is astounding to me. But yeah, I wouldn't put any of them in. 9th spot, Wellington Phoenix, 17 games played, 21 points. I still think they can do it, but I think we'll come to the consensus of both of us that maybe.
Let's do 7, 8, 9 together, all right? And then we'll go through who's the most likely.
So Western United, 15 games played, 23 points. Same for Brisbane Roar. So 7, 8, 9, Brisbane Roar, Western United, Wellington Phoenix. I think Brisbane Roar can do it. What about out of these three? I've got Brisbane Roar as the most likely. What about you?
I have Western United with only Western Sydney dropping out. I think MacArthur have enough quality in individuals like Susueta, like Extraberria, like Milligan, who knows the league, like Federici, who's class. I think they've got enough that they'll maybe just scrape in that 6th position. Those are my picks for the last two final spots, MacArthur and Western United. As things currently stand, knowing that I'll backtrack and change my mind this time next week, as I always do.
More games played means plenty of opportunity to change your mind. Starting with the top 6, 18 games played, 25 points. It is the Western Sydney Wanderers. 5th place, MacArthur, 18 games played, 27 points. Sydney FC, 17 games played, 27 points as well in 4th spot.
Before we go into the top 3, because I think they're a different conversation. Yep. Western Sydney, no wins in their last 6. MacArthur, 2 wins in their last 6. Sydney FC, I think it's 3 wins in their last 6. So, we're starting to see different form patterns start to determine where teams are sitting in the table. It's not... If you were to go on even a points per game type thing, more and more clubs, because they're playing more matches, are actually falling down the table because they're not putting that run together. Who do you... I'll look for it while you run through the top 3, but I'm just going to try and find Western Sydney's next couple of fixtures and see where they're actually coming up as to where they're going to try and pick up their points. So Western
Sydney's next 2 fixtures are Melbourne victory on Friday night, so that should be 3 points for them, and then it's the derby a week later.
Yeah, and then they've got Western United the week after. That'll be huge. And it looks like Perth Glory away in Perth the following weekend. So they've got some very big fixtures that they'll need to try and steer the ship and right the ship and get themselves a nice little run of points just to get some sort of separation, because that 2-point gap, that might as well be that they're 5 points behind, I think, with both of those teams at the minute. MacArthur, I think, will get their shit together. It looks like they are playing... Sorry, if I scroll back up to their fixtures. Melbourne City next weekend. That's a tough one for them.
That one's in Middletown, I believe.
Yeah, Perth Glory away on the Friday night at 9:40 p.m. That's a tricky one as well. Then Melbourne Victory on the Friday night the week after. That's guaranteed 3 points is the way things currently stand, unless Steve Keane changes the world. Then they play Melbourne Victory again the weekend after. They've got Victory back-to-back in consecutive weekends heading into their run home. So I think maybe that's the difference maker. If they pick up 6 points there, that's going to be a challenge. Effectively, Melbourne Victory, weird thing to say, they are going to impact the finals race because whoever's got 2 games against them left is pretty much guaranteed 6 points, which is absolutely ridiculous. But apologies, please continue with the top 3.
No, you're right. So top 3, Adelaide United and Central Coast, both with 17 games played, identical 9-3 and 5 records, 30 points apiece. And rounding out the ladder in first place, 16 games played, 10-1 and 5, 31 points, is Melbourne City. Do you think Melbourne City goes on and does the job? and rounds out top of the season, or do you think that, say, an Adelaide or a Sydney is going to? Well, okay, we'll say Adelaide. Do you think Adelaide will catch them?
Too early to tell, to be completely honest, because they're only at 16. I think once we start getting that balance of more teams being on like 8, I think the way it's currently working, based on just flicking through the current postponed fixtures and everything as well. And I don't know if you got one for Sydney FC, but I got one today about Melbourne City's remaining home fixtures throughout May and into June as well. If we get all the teams to 20, I think then we're going to have a bit of balance as to like the run of form and where things are at. I still think Central Coast could kind of get their season together again a little bit. They've got a couple of big like weeks coming up, playing the likes of Victory, Newcastle, and whoever else. So you think they can get points, you think they can get good performances, you think they could go from there. So I'm not that top 4 to me. I think is still very fluid. That 4-point gap between first and fourth, and most of them now have played that 17 game mark. So I think for me, there's a definitive top 4 that I don't think are going to miss out on finals now. I think they're all secure in their positions. I wouldn't be shocked if they start to kind of like rotate around between different positions in that top 4 over the next couple of days, weeks, and hopefully the last 2 months of the season. So yeah, fascinating contest. Great to see that ebb and flow. What was Central Coast lead at one point? Like 6 points, 7 points clear?
It was some sort of lead. It was basically a ridiculous lead where it's like, how the hell is this happening with this Central Coast?
Yeah.
But
it was games in hand, of course, but like it's still interesting to see it kind of coming back together again so late in the season. And again, like City, even though they're at top, they've still lost 5 games. So it still goes to show, I think, that on any given day in the league this season, anybody has been able to beat anybody. They lost to Newcastle, for Christ's sake. Like like anything could really happen at any point. I just think, as far as exciting seasons is concerned, as much as there was negativity surrounding the league at the start of the year and what the future held for football in Australia and some very negative sections of soccer Twitter as to how they approach the game. Like for me, this season, and I say this with my team sitting top of the table, has been one of the most exciting throughout the course of the league because it is so competitive and so many teams are going out to have a crack and so many teams are, taking points off each other every week, which is absolutely crazy. Only 10 points between first and ninth. I can't remember the last time that we had a conversation at this point of the season, nearly 2/3 of the way through, where that was the scenario and that was the situation, and so many teams were still in the conversation for finals football.
Yep. Once again, we've run over on this particular segment. We tried though. I think we're about 50% so far of hitting the clock. I could be wrong. But we'll move on now to the headlines. And there were a couple of big ones this week. Grant Brebner sacked. This came 6 weeks after he was given the full vote of confidence from the board, which, as we all know, is the death knell in sports. Although it usually doesn't take 6 weeks for it to happen. It's usually 2 to 3 weeks later. So a 7-0 loss was the final nail in the coffin as far as DiPietro and the rest of the Melbourne Victory board was concerned. Steve Keane has been named as interim coach for the rest of the season, with Jean-Paul Desmarini, the interim assistant coach. I think that the board's done Grant Brebner a favour here by sacking him and not subjecting him to further torment for a job that he didn't want. As much as he said he was in it, Brebner said his heart was in it. The fact that he didn't want the job in the first place just tells volumes as to how much one's heart can really be in it. This is going to sound incredibly harsh, but I think what DiPietro needs to do is DiPietro needs to go out and he needs to find a replacement for himself. He needs to resign as chairman, promote the replacement to chairman, and then get the chairman to fire him and just keep his share in the club. DiPietro has run that club into the ground. I don't subscribe to the notion of, the big clubs need to be big and good for the good of Australia, for the good of the A-League. Everyone says a good Western Sydney Wanderers is good for the A-League, a good Victory is good for the A-League. I don't subscribe to that notion, but the fact that this has been allowed to happen on DiPietro's watch is absolutely shameful. And I know that Victory is a club, they're the biggest club, they're this, they're that, they sell out all their boardroom lunches and the corporate boxes are always full, but at the end of the day, their business is football, and that's not where football is at the moment for the Victory. What do you think about this one, Shaun?
I don't think they did him any favours because for me it was sad to watch someone have to sit there in a press conference as they're telling the press that they've been sacked and then have to turn around and thank the club. I don't, as you mentioned, he didn't want the job. Like that was 9 months ago, almost to the day, I think, after he sacked it, that article came out with him directly saying, no, I'm not interested in the head coach position. And then he was given it anyway. I don't think Di Pietro has covered himself in any glory with that. I think a lot of people from the outside looking in, like, don't get me wrong, like I agree with you. I don't think we need anybody to be like, I keep seeing that thing, and I think you tweeted it actually. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus or throw shade at you or anything like that, but it was about that guy, and it's like, the guy sitting there like with his head in his hands, like, and everyone was like, oh, I want to buy this guy beer. I'm like, no, less than a week ago, he got to celebrate his club winning the W League. He's got to celebrate 4 divisional titles. He's got to celebrate 3 championship wins, or the other way around, I can't remember. He's got FFA Cups to celebrate. He's got youth league titles. Like, this is not a man that has had to endure hardship or relegation or any difficulty in his life. He's had 2 bad results this season, both of which Fox Sports has given him like whatever else. And huge credit to the Victory Active support as well, because they did stay for the entire game and just chanted how fucking shit they were. But like, this isn't like, these things aren't make or break. No one's like living and dying and breathing on football in Australia. We have a good enough quality of life that this isn't actually going to be impacting anybody to that extent. So Victory, they kind of deserve what they're getting. I do hope, and I did tweet this out, that Victory fans get what they need, which is an elite level training facility, which now, if you look at most of that top 6, most of them have access to some sort of elite level training facility, and they get an elite level academy structure, because that's where they're falling behind. That is where City is beating Victory at the moment. They have that elite level training facility. They are staking a claim for a particular section of Melbourne, which was the one criticism that everybody always had. They had no identity. What does identity mean? No one really knows, because what's Victory's? They were there first. That's it. Now they're trying to get that regional and geographic line. I think Victory need to do the same thing. I think that'll end up being in the northern suburbs of Melbourne somewhere, and they'll start looking to take over maybe that Bundoora base where the Matildas are getting their home built up soon. There's a lot of stuff going along around Latrobe University in the northern suburbs. That I desperately hope they get that, because I do think that's good for Australian football. I think that's good for young player development. I think that's the best thing for football as a game as a whole. But there is no sense of entitlement that says just because they've been around longest, just because their trophy cabinet is the fullest, that they have any right to go and stake a claim to being anything other than a team fortunate to be in the league. I know there's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't want to talk about relating to certain teams' entitlement, about how they're going to separate themselves and put themselves on a pedestal when it comes to revenue and playing against each other and all that sort of stuff. I think Grant Brebner wasn't a scapegoat. I think he was a lackey put in charge to cover the shortcomings and the failings. I think they're going to go after a big name coach. Like, I don't think it's going to be Mourinho levels, even though he's on the market, but it wouldn't strike me as difficult if a household name of some type comes back into the club and everybody immediately forgets how poor a job Di Pietro has done. The big challenge for me is that at no point has anybody else come forward from the football community or Melbourne Victory fan support or supporters or whatever else to say, oh, I'll be the chairman. Like, I will invest additional funds in this. You can't go out and replace a board instantaneously. That's not how it works. You can't go out. Yeah, like, unless they're not, because they're publicly traded and they're not wholly owned. It's not the same as like Newcastle trying to sell the club. It's not the same as Mike Charlesworth trying to sell the club. It is largely a fan share and, independent board of directors that is involved in that. I think the way that they let Brabner go was harsh. I don't think they should have made him sit there in that press conference. Have the courage, Di Pietro, to go out there, and if you've made that decision, go out there and face that press alone and announce it and take the questions from the press, valid questions that the fans have a right to get answers to, and let Brebner go and do a press conference 2 days from now for a Herald Sun article or for a Sydney Morning Herald article or an Age article or whatever else that goes in. That's where he thanks the club. Don't make him sit there quietly while you're telling everybody he's just been sacked and he has to turn around and say, oh, thanks everyone for a wonderful opportunity. Because that's, like, I'm sure he's hurting. I'm sure he knew he was out of his depth. And I'm sure, as much as everybody wants to admit that this is, like, wants to think this is going to be the thing that solves it for Victory, he's not the one that conceded 13 goals. He didn't concede 4 goals in the last 10 minutes of the first game at Etihad. He didn't concede 5 goals in the last 15 minutes of the game this past weekend. So some of that does have to fall on the players. Yes, he got his organisation wrong. Yes, he got his structures wrong. I don't know how much he had to do with the actual recruitment itself or if that's a board thing, but they 100% got that wrong. To me, I think the worst part is that Steve Keane, by all accounts, as far as Blackburn fans are concerned, is not that big a step up. And Jean-Paul Demarigny, old Slappy himself, he's not had the greatest record in caretaker roles either. It could be very interesting, I think, to see how Victory play out the rest of the season and what sort of changes they go after. If they really dive into, we're going to play kids, we're going to try and develop, we're going to try and get that sort of stuff. But if they come out at the end of this season without that training ground and academy announced, like their future looks incredibly bleak.
Just get Tony Popovich and his sons in, it'll be all right. Let's move on to headline number 2. Sportsflick is reported to have lost the rights to the Champions League and the Europa League and Nations League and all the, like, basically the UEFA broadcast rights. Now, this was first reported in the Age that they've lost the rights. They weren't able to stump up the initial payment. It was initially supposed to be a $60 million deal, $20 million over 3 years, or $20 million per year for 3 years. UEFA have gone about asking other broadcasters who were involved in the bidding process, Stan Sports, Optus, whether they're still interested in acquiring the rights. So there could be a number of factors around this. This story broke right around the same time of the talk of the European Super League. So it could, and this is what Sportsflick had to say in a statement they put out. Sportsflick can confirm it will not be seeking to finalise its UEFA Champions League, Europa League, Conference League bids for the 2021 to 2024 seasons. Sportsflick had been issued with a bank guarantee for the media rights by a financial institution. They were contacted by UEFA representatives and given the opportunity to complete the media rights agreement yesterday. So, as I said, stumping up that initial payment. In light of the current uncertainty in European football, the directors and shareholders have made the decision not to proceed and provide the necessary contractual items to complete the deal at this time. Commercial factors of the bid have to be considered, with the uncertainty with respect to the participation of certain clubs in line with its fiduciary duties. Sportsflick's directors cannot in good faith commit investor funds to securing the media rights, and that they will not make any further comment at this time. So I'm going to come out and say that I think this is a little column A, a little bit of column B. So I think that they may, and this is not slanderous, and I'm not coming out of slander, not that I have anything to be sued for, but I need to make that perfectly clear. I don't necessarily think their funding was as strong as they're putting it out as, and that they had everything they were reported to have in terms of guarantees and everything like that. But that being said, I also think that the news of this European Super League and all the other crap associated with that would certainly make anyone wary, and so had the deal not been completed, I don't blame Sportsflick for pulling out. So I think this is a little column A, column B kind of scenario. What this, and I know you'll talk about this for a little bit. Well, I think so. One of the bidders was reported to be Stan Sport, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago here that Stan Sport would be a good home for the A League and the W League if they're if what was reported to be believed, which was a $35 million per season deal for Stan Sport to be the exclusive home of the A League and the W League. I think that having UEFA football there as well will help put eyeballs on the A League and the W League, because it will all be in the one place again, which can only be a good thing for Australian football. What do you think, Shaun?
So look, we never heard from Sportsflick to say that, and this was the part that I was trying to kind of get to when we were talking about our run sheet before we started recording, was that Sportsflick never came out and said that they'd gotten the Optus rights. The Champions League rights from Optus. They had been quiet up until that entire bid process, their tender, whatever else. Everything we'd heard was by articles in other publications, sometimes with a minor quote from people involved, or it was an explanation to try and figure out who this company actually was. I think for me, it's the fascinating part, and the part that relates back to the A-League isn't necessarily all the Champions League stuff, isn't necessarily the uncertainty that the ESL might have come in. They may very well be telling the truth and had a bank guarantee, but then when the bank saw the change in potential and projected revenue, if those top 12 sides in the competition aren't necessary, and I say top with massive air quotes, go and check out Gary Neville's Twitter if you want a good summarization of my feelings as well, but they potentially looked at that and say, okay, this doesn't have necessarily the value behind it that it did when we agreed to this bank loan. So I can 100% agree that being truthful, but the part that I think is perhaps the most fascinating is that Sportsflick has been quiet the entire way through. just plugging the stuff they've already got, never really officially announcing the Champions League rights deal. But then as soon as an article comes out that morning that says that they don't have funding anymore, that's when they start releasing the press release that you spoke about above. I think it was Vince Regari, and apologies, Vince, if it wasn't you, but maybe had the initial tweet that went out saying that they were struggling to get that funding or struggling to get that bank guarantee to complete the purchase portion. Whereas I think they're still trying to illustrate that they do have that funding and that they did have that bank allowance or whatever else, with a view that they're going to start looking into other football properties, whether that is a Super League competition somewhere, whether that is a A-League bidding right portion again, whether that is international fixtures for the Socceroos or Matildas, whether that is additional stuff for the Olympics or World Cups or whatever else. That's the part that I think was most fascinating about it. They only really wanted to come out and clarify that, yes, they had bank guarantees and yes, they still had funding, which makes me think that even if they're not looking at that Champions League model anymore, they are still looking at football properties, and potentially, as far as the A-League and W League is concerned, potentially another person that's now come back into the market. We spoke about when we kind of talked about this deal a few weeks ago, Stephen, that they can't have an infinite pool of cash to pay that Champions League rights money to go after those sort of big competitions and then also invest in the A-League. So potentially that might have counted them out. Maybe from an A-League perspective, a domestic perspective, having that $60 million for 3 years. And the worst part is everybody knows what kind of funding they're working with at the moment because they were so braggadocious about boasting about it across social media or allowing those things to kind of come in. I don't think they're going to be a good bidder, but I could definitely see them going back in for an A-League product. And hopefully the likes of Stan Sport, Optus Sport, whatever other services potentially are looking at the A-League and W League as being content for their platforms. We now have a bit of a bidding war, and we're now starting to create value around the league itself because we do get consistent viewership and we do get great social media engagement on Twitter. Facebook's a little bit of a different story, but I think that's the exciting portion for me. Do we have someone else now, because they're not committed to that Champions League project, that's going to be looking more at Australian football, which is only for me a positive, having more people interested, more people driving that bidding process, more people trying to elevate production, reporting, media access, media visibility experience, which has been fairly shit for the majority of this season. And more on, we could go on Fox Sports for 2.5 hours. There isn't a countdown clock big enough for that particular podcast episode. But that's the exciting portion for me, is that they might be back in looking at domestic football. And if they are, that's only a good thing as far as our viewing experience is concerned.
Yeah, that might be an off-season podcast when we're having a lull week to dissect everything to do with Fox Sports, although I don't think I could sit myself through that torture. I've lost my train of thought. This is the beauty of editing. So I think that having the fact that, as you said, potential multiple bidders, you mentioned all the social media engagement. I think the fact that this has been the best season in terms of a competitive standpoint, there's a lot more even games. I'd have to have a deeper dive at the numbers on this. I think there's been substantially less blowouts than there has been in past years, at least on the surface. The fact that the competition is good can only help that process. And I hope that we can get a broadcast part, or the league can get a broadcast partner that has the same level of commitment that Fox Sports did 5 years ago.
Well, and I know you don't want to talk about it because I know we'll go down the rabbit hole, but if there are people that are now starting to get disenfranchised with teams that are trying to do the selfish things in Europe and aren't going to watch Premier League football and aren't going to watch Champions League football, why not the A-League? Why not watch one in your own time zone? Why not watch a league that you can go to a game to, or run into your star striker at Kmart on a Saturday afternoon? If the discontent I've never seen, as far as the Super League announcement is concerned, the global football Twitter sphere that I happen to be involved in, so united against something. Yep. There's always some douchebag with a hot take or trying to be deliberately contrarian that is going out saying, nah, this is a great thing. What are you guys talking about, you idiots? But we haven't really seen that. Everyone's been avidly against it across all forms of media and all different perspectives throughout the game. So if there are people that are frustrated and aren't going to get up to watch Liverpool or United or Chelsea or anybody like that, why not go and give one of the A-League sides a go? The shit part will be Manchester City and the City Football Group will get banned from Europe the season that City qualifies for the Champions League. It'll ruin my life, but we will work through that in future podcast episodes as well. But I think everything's a domino effect. The worldwide landscape is interconnected for football, and everything's related to everything else. There are potential benefits, I feel, for the A-League itself, and the sports flick portion is just one part of it. But maybe, Stephen, our fan base and our audience is going to grow a little bit. Maybe there's going to be a few new faces in the terraces next season. Maybe there'll be a few more people for you to kind of like boost Steve Corica with down at Cogarara Lockhart Ovals next season. So very, very exciting, I think, for the future of the game, and very exciting time to be an A-League fan as well.
It is. This European crap has done one thing that I never thought would be entirely possible, and that has managed to unite people who have been spending years throwing crap at each other because you support this team and I support this team, so we have to hate each other. It's managed to unite football fans worldwide, and that's all we want. Football fans to be united for football. So that will do us for this week. Let us know what you thought of the new format. Let us know what you thought of the way we do things. I know that we didn't quite keep to the clock the way we hoped we would, but we never keep into time. But we'll tinker with that. But let us know what you think. I thought we did relatively well, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. You can hit us up on Twitter at ReserveTeamAU. I'm at Poletti Steven. Shaun is at InTheMixer_FM. Check out the reserveteam.com.au for all the latest news concerning Australian and New Zealand football, some stats analysis, some hot takes. You'll find everything you need there. Is there anything you want to plug, Shaun?
No, just like feedback below in the comment section, positive or negative. If you're listening over on Spotify, because we are going to try and test that portion out as well, please let us know what you guys want to see over the coming weeks. So much of the content on the reserveteam.com.au and here on the YouTube channel as well will be driven by what you guys want to see. So by all means, please let us know. We'll dedicate whole episodes to topics that you guys want to talk about. We really don't care at all. So yeah, just grateful for everyone for listening in and watching along, and looking forward to doing it all again next week with you, Stephen.
And I look forward to doing it again with you as well. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.